House in Baltimore. 9-hour flight back home with many disgruntled Ravens fans along two different issues, losing 44-0 at one point in the game, as well as the knee. And we'll be talking very openly with everyone about all of that this week. Luke Jones now joins us to do something we probably won't be doing a ton of, which is sort of going around the league and talking about what's going on, because it is Pittsburgh week here. The Ravens do have the biggest game of their year so far, as do the Steelers here, but around the league, boy, there were a lot of teams there were a lot of shocking results while we were over in London. And I think by and large, everyone here is sort of searching for an answer in the league this side of, let's say, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Atlanta Falcons, right?
Oh, it comes down to this. I mean, we shouldn't be shocked. That's the big thing. We shouldn't be shocked because that's the NFL. And our good pal Brian Billick was tweeting about this throughout Sunday's action. I mean, basically said, this is the NFL. I mean, when you have teams that are undefeated losing to winless teams and things of that nature, and lopsided scores that are completely unexpected, like what happened against the Ravens. And I mean, it's just nothing makes sense from a week to week, especially the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. How many times, if you would go back and pull up the archives on everything we know about a season, other than, okay, New England's really good every year, and their opening night loss notwithstanding, I would expect them to be really good again. And for the last 5 or 6 years, and going back longer than that, you expect teams like the Cleveland Browns to be really bad. But for those let's call it 26 or 27 teams in the middle, maybe you have 2 or 3 elite at the top, 2 or 3 absolutely dreadful teams at the bottom. You have everyone else that you're trying to figure out, and sometimes you're trying to figure them out all the way into December. And the Ravens have, unfortunately kind of been in that category as far as, last year they started 3-0, and then they finished 8-8, and they ended up being pretty mediocre when it's all said and done. But that line from mediocre to good, or that line from good to great, isn't all that, it's a pretty fine line. It's not a huge gap to go there, but you just look around this league when you're talking about an undefeated Denver team going to Buffalo and losing to the Bills. You talk about the fact that Pittsburgh goes to Chicago, a team that some people were wondering if they were going to win more than 2 or 3 games, and they lose, and they give up a ton of yards on the ground. You talk about
Tampa Bay losing in Minnesota the way they did.
Exactly. With the Vikings not having their starting quarterback. I mean, you just go down the list. It's crazy. Look at New England against Houston, who had not exactly looked very good to this point. The Texans gave the Patriots everything they could possibly handle.
Well, I had Steph Stradley on the show earlier this week to talk about the knee and all that stuff. Boy, they got a quarterback down there, right? I mean, Deshaun Watson looks like he's going to be an NFL quarterback. And it's a small sample size, as you would say. But when you go out and put 300 up on Bill Belichick up there and almost win, boy, that's that should be a very heartening thing for anyone who's a Houston Texans fan that's watched really bad quarterback play there since Matt Schaub.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's way too early to say one way or the other, but certainly, Deshaun Watson, even his collegiate career, seeing what this guy did at Clemson, you got to give him credit for that. And he has physical tools. There's no doubt about that.
Well, there were 3 or 4 teams that needed a quarterback that didn't give him credit, right? Literally.
Right. And I think the big question there is how well do they protect him? For a rookie quarterback, and look, to say that it's success, you have to kind of grade on a curve, just like we graded Joe Flacco on a curve back in 2008. But you really need to have an offensive line, and that's going to be the big question for Watson. But there are things to like about him. There's no doubt about that, and I would have said that even before he's had a chance to play these first few games. But you have that. The Jets, who we were wondering if they were going to win a game, they beat Miami pretty convincingly by 2 touchdowns. So this is just a crazy league. The Giants, who a lot of people thought were going to be good, some people were picking them to win that division. They're 0-3 now.
Dude, 0-3 in New York is unacceptable, right?
Well,
wow.
Line, their offensive line is. You think the Ravens have offensive line problems? Their line is a complete disaster. And that's not to say the Ravens line isn't bordering on being a disaster, but that line is a disaster. And when you have an aging quarterback who's not what he was, that makes things that much worse. there. So
well, there's a lot of that going on too, right? I mean, I've heard that with Roethlisberger all week. He's an aging quarterback, and not everyone does the Tom Brady thing. And I think for all of us that watch Peyton Manning literally disintegrate, right, over a 2-year period of time, that where that Willie Mays, we always bring it up as Willie Mays, right? I mean, watching Willie Mays run around bow-legged in 1973 and looking like an old man, for quarterbacks in this league, the Romos who slip out the side door or the Cutlers who pretend they're going to slip out the side door. Then there's guys like, I saw Carson Palmer the other night throwing it around, and he doesn't look like Carson Palmer to me, right? And I don't know that Roethlisberger's going to look like Roethlisberger. We've all said that Flacco doesn't look like Flacco, and then you've got Drew Brees and Eli Manning and these other guys. It really is kind of otherworldly, but we are starting to turn the page a little bit on some of these 30-year-old quarterbacks, and it has to be about the kid down in Tennessee or the kid down in Tampa Bay or this kid down in Houston right now.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the future of this league. You need to start developing some young stars. And the good news is you have some guys who've looked really, really good. I mean, I really like Marcus Mariota. I've really liked what I've seen from Jameis Winston since he entered the league. Not necessarily talking the first couple weeks of this season. And you hope Deshaun Watson can be in that category. I mean, you just said it. Peyton Manning's obviously retired now, but what Tom Brady and Drew Brees, who is kind of in the same boat as far as his age, what they continue to do, that's otherworldly. That's Hall of Fame stuff right there. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, they're obviously talking about Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers, who isn't exactly a young man anymore. These are guys that are playing up into their mid-30s at such a high level, and in Tom Brady's case, 40 years old now.
Well, they've been so relied upon. We haven't talked about a quarterback here in 10 years, Luke, right? I mean, for 10 straight years now, we have not had to talk about drafting a quarterback. They haven't had to do that in New York. They haven't had to do that with the Chargers. There's a lot of places where it's just been plug and play. And then, the Minnesota thing happens with Bridgewater, and your best laid plans go out the window, and you got to go figure it out, right? And it looks like Matt Ryan might have this little window here, right? Like where he might be the best of all of them right now for a little while when he needs to be at a time where he's still physically still there and not broken, right?
Right. I mean, clearly, after what he did last year, speaks for itself, the success he had. But you do have this old guard of great, elite, Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks that, it's not going to be much longer. I mean, Tom Brady, I know he's talked about playing though he's 45 or 46. I'm not buying that. I think he's got a couple more years, maybe, and I think he's got a couple more years of playing at a high level, maybe, if he can stay healthy. But, sooner than later, he's going to be done. Sooner than later, Drew Brees is going to be done. Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be around forever. So, in the meantime, you need to see some of these other quarterbacks. Matt Ryan has kind of stepped up over the last year or so. You want to see some of these young guys start to look like they can be the next great quarterbacks in the NFL. And there's certainly some talented individuals. We haven't mentioned Derek Carr, but the Raiders didn't play well against Washington on Sunday night. Another surprising outcome there. So there's a lot of feeling out. The first few weeks of the NFL season really do feel a lot like those first few weeks or the first few rounds of a boxing match, where everyone's kind of feeling each other out. There's some surprises. You'll see someone will get knocked down early, so to speak, when you have one of these surprising losses, like what happened to the Ravens, for example. And then as you get into October, not that there's separation at that point because there's so much parity, but I feel like you start to develop a better idea of, okay, Team A is pretty good. Team B that we thought was going to be good, they're pretty lousy the way it looked. And the Bengals look like that right now, right? So you kind of just feel this all out. But in the meantime, we're always so surprised. We're always so shocked. And I feel like you and I, and we're not alone in this. I mean, everyone's doing this kind of stuff, these first couple days of the new week, looking back at what happened on Sunday. But we always talk about, well, that was a surprise and that was a shocker, and I didn't see that coming. But when you're saying that every year, is it really that much of a surprise anymore? It's just, it's the expect the unexpected early in the season with the NFL. So, as much as that's where you take a little bit of solace if you're a Ravens fan, still trying to figure out what the heck happened in London on Sunday. It's when you do look around and say, well, the high-powered Raiders offense managed 10 points on Sunday night. And you just go down the list and say all these different teams that lost games that you're really surprised by. Carolina, who was 2-0, and they were facing the 0-2 Saints at home.
They're like a mirror of the Ravens, right? For the disappointment of what the hell happened this weekend, right? Denver too, probably.
I mean, that's to lose by. I mean, it's one thing. The Ravens lost by 37 points. I mean, that's completely unacceptable. But it's one thing to be playing on the road or in a neutral site like the Ravens were, and it's another thing to get absolutely, get your butts handed to you by 21 points to a team that was 0-2
at home.
At home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's completely inexcusable. So there's a lot of that kind of thing going on right now where you're trying to figure things out. You're looking at some of these teams that are 2-1 or 3-0 and say, okay, how real is that? Even Kansas City, who, don't get me wrong, they've been incredibly impressive, and I'll give them all the credit in the world, but are you still looking at that team with Alex Smith as their quarterback and saying, yeah, I think the Chiefs are going 14-2? Well, I still don't see that, but then again, Kareem Hunt continues to run for $160, $170, $180, and 2 touchdowns every game. Maybe they will be 14-2. So you're just trying to figure all that out. You don't want to start off so bad that you just put yourself in a hole that you can't climb out of. Look at the Chargers; they're 0-3 right now. The Giants are 0-3. Those are the teams that, barring a major turnaround, they're already burying themselves. This is what the Ravens did 2 years ago, right? I mean, they got off to such a bad start that it kind of becomes silly talking about making a playoff run because you can't get out of your own way early in the season, even if they're close games. So you're trying to regroup. You're trying to just get as many wins as you can while you're trying to figure out who you are as a football team, and then hoping that you stay healthy enough to make a run once you get into November, that you're hoping you're in a position that you can be one of those teams that's still standing at the end of December. So, the Ravens, they're in that same mixing bowl as 27, 28 other teams right now that you're just trying to figure out to what degree, of those teams, who are the really good teams, who are the okay teams, who are the really mediocre teams, who are the not so good, below average, and who's dreadful. You have that many teams all kind of just feeling each other out right now, and what you end up happening is quite a few surprises as we saw over the weekend.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. Luke, one thing I just want to bring up with you, because we probably won't talk too much about it this week. It's just our division in general and how awful the Browns and Bengals appear to be at this point. That it is a lot of these other divisions are still open for 3 teams, in many cases 4 teams. I mean, I think the South and the AFC is wide open. Obviously the NFC South and the NFC West still have a lot of open innings there and bad starts. Somebody's going to win. But in our division, I mean, that's one of the parts of this game this week. These other 2 teams, they're not coming to get anybody, right? I mean, there is a spot at stake here. It will be the Ravens or the Steelers playing playoff football on behalf of the AFC North in January. You know what I mean? Like, it's a 2-team race, and the leaves haven't started to change. I mean, that's a little weird. I mean, it's been a while since it's been like that.
Yeah, and how about even making matters worse for Cleveland and Cincinnati is how badly the Ravens lost to the Jaguars.
Oh, right.
I mean, it kind of makes you. And look, we can do this all the time. You say, okay, well, if point A happens and then point B happens, and well, then that means point C should happen. It doesn't work that way. If one team A beats team B and team B beats team C, then A should beat C, right? And we see how many times that doesn't work out. But at least just based on what we know, seeing what happened to the Ravens against the Jaguars probably doesn't make the Browns and Bengals feel any better about their situations. But you're right. I mean, it's very, very clearly shaping up to be a 2-team race to this point, and clearly a lot can change between now and then, but hard to envision that much changing with the Bengals or the Browns. I mean, I think the Browns have more talent than they've had in a long time, but that doesn't mean that they still don't have a long way to go. You give the Bengals credit for the way they played at Lambeau Field, certainly, but they still lost. So how much credit do you give them? Ultimately, it's a pass-fail kind of deal. And we spent most of the 2015 season picking apart the Ravens having all these narrow losses. Well, they still lost. So how good were they? So you look at this division, and the urgency is that that much greater for these two games against Pittsburgh, and certainly the first one being played at home this Sunday. But you look at the rest of the AFC. What really stands out, the AFC West or the AFC East. Okay, the Bills have been a decent story so far, but everyone expects New England to be standing undisputed champion in that division in the end. The AFC South, right now, I like what I've seen from Tennessee. Who knows with the Jaguars? I mean, maybe the Jaguars are better than we think. They certainly took it to Houston on the road in the opener, and you saw what they did against the Ravens.
Hey, Bortles didn't make any mistakes. I mean, Bortles did not look like he didn't know what he was doing out there. And certainly the Ravens defense couldn't force the issue in a lot of ways. But, lost in all of the things that happened on Sunday in 44-0 was Blake Bortles had a good day, had the best day of his career, right?
Yeah, I mean, that effort will certainly work when you look at the talent on that defense. I mean, the Jaguars have stockpiled a lot of talent over the last 5, 6, 7 years when they've been so bad. I mean,
Gus Bradley watching this from the outside's got to, if that team ever takes off, it's all from residue of that era, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's, it's kind of like talking about the Tampa Bay Rays when they had their run.
Right.
It was because they were picking in the top 2 or 3 every single year for about a decade. I mean, that's just the way it works. I mean, eventually you should cash in. But I think the division that's really interesting, needless to say, is the AFC West. I mean, the Chargers are 0-3, certainly, so you kind of write them off, even though they haven't always played extremely poorly. They're still snake bitten. I mean, they're still the San Diego Chargers in terms of, you find a team that finds a way to lose a game in the end, that's them. But the rest of that division, that's why these matchups with the Steelers, that much more important, because the way that division shakes out, and I get it, they're going to play each other, so they're going to beat each other up a bit, but at the same time, it's not like these teams play each other 4 times. You have the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Raiders who, even though the Broncos and Raiders lost this week, they've looked really good.
They all look like they're going to win 10 games, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can't, if you're the Ravens and the Steelers, you cannot go into this and say, okay, well, yeah, Cincinnati stinks and Cleveland stinks, so you hope you get a combined 4 wins right there, or at least 3 at an absolute minimum. And then even if you don't win the division, the wild card's in play. Certainly, it could be in play, and I'm not crowning both wild cards going to the AFC West after 3 weeks. That would be silly. But you anticipate those 3 teams all being good. Certainly Oakland, they were kind of the favorite in most people's minds. But Kansas City, what they've been able to do, and with their rookie sensation running back, and Denver, even though they lost this week, they looked really good their first couple games. So you can't guarantee that there's going to be a wild card coming out of this division. So it makes that Steelers game on Sunday that much more important. But we're still trying to figure this all out, and inevitably, right now, there's a team sitting at 1-2 that no one's talking about. That 6 weeks from now, we'll be saying, "Hey, that team's not bad." I don't think it's the New York Jets at 1-2, but there's some team that's just kind of lying in the weeds, and maybe it's Houston. Maybe it's Houston figuring out. Deshaun Watson gets a little bit better, and their defense starts playing at a higher level than it has to this point. They get their left tackle back, who's been a holdout situation. That stabilizes things there. Maybe Houston's that team that's 1-2 right now that figures it out. But right now we're just trying to kind of make our way through all this residue. And it was definitely one of those weekends where you scratch your head in the NFL, because it's one of those times where just when you think you're starting to figure things out, the conditions change and suddenly
Roddy Piper, go ahead. You were going to say it. Exactly. I know what you were going to do. Go ahead, just go ahead and do it.
Just when you think you have all the answers, I changed the question.
There it is.
And that certainly applies the hot rod with that great save. And rest in peace. Very appropriate talking about Week 3 in the NFL based on what we saw.
He is Luke at WNST.net, as well as Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. I am out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day. We're dusting off the jet lag, dusting off the loss of our beloved Kitty around here, and I've written a tribute to her out at WNST.net. I hope that you go and check that out as well. Don't forget, our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox. That story will be in there tomorrow as well. It's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com. And, of course, our text service, updating you on all the injuries, where the Ravens roster is, and, of course, even the bad news on Brent Urban the other day, whom I like very much, now lost with the Elise Frank injury. All of that is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here from 3 until 5 on Thursday with the SSV on WNST. I am a very available individual, even in the last week of the baseball season. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I like this time of the year because it gives me a chance to wear my Caps Courage hat, so I've got that on my television channel as well. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.